Welcome to the Shit Shower and Self-Care podcast, a place for men to talk about the stuff that matters. For now, grab yourself a drink and let's crack on. So, welcome to episode 4 of the Shit Shower and Self-Care podcast. Thank you to everyone who listened to the last episodes and where we had Jake Blakey from Rainbow Blades talking about sort of rainbow on the terraces, talking about sexuality, talking about football, talking about mental health. Thank you to everyone who shared, liked, commented on that. It really meant a lot. And the same goes with today as well. If you can share, if you can like, comment, anything at all, it just helps spread the word of what we're trying to do. So just a massive thank you for that in advance. And today I'm joined by Alex Walmsley, and I'm going to allow Alex to introduce himself because, as I've said before, people know themselves far better than I can know them. So, Alex, can I just ask you to introduce yourself a little bit, if that's okay?
So I suppose I'm a dad of lost children. My wife and I lost 3 babies, as well as losing my brother when I was younger. And that's why I'm kind of here today to talk about my journey and the football team that I've set up, SANDS United West Yorkshire, which supports other dads that have lost children. Our journey started in 2018 with losing our first child at 12 weeks. We had a scan and we were told that the baby had a fatal condition and would die. And we went through a difficult process, which people will talk about a bit. And that pretty much ended the pregnancy. And flash forward a bit further, we started again. Same scan room at Dewsbury Hospital, same chair, same crappy kind of introduction to the room and crappy old building. And exactly the same scenario. Baby had another fatal condition, so this is a separate child now that we lost again. So that's a boy and a girl at this point that we'd lost. And my wife had as my stepson Isaac. So when I came in, I thought I was the problem. So that's kind of been a difficult thing that I think we'll talk about again a bit later on. And then a bit later on, we had another child, and we miscarried at 5 weeks. So I set up SANDS United West Yorkshire after doing some charity work for them. We did the Leeds 10K twice and in Manchester with runner. And then the team's kind of just grown from there. So we started the first game just before Toby, technically our 4th child, was born in March 2020. And yeah, we're still kind of going strong. So that's why I'm here today, to talk about that and the baby loss from a men's perspective.
Thank you, Alex. And I think before we even say anything else, I think I could speak on behalf of everyone listening. Just a huge thank you for sharing, even what you've shared so far. And one of the aims of this podcast, of how I try to set this up, is that what we want to encourage are those conversations that men don't often have together. The type of conversations that, if we could, we'd want to be able to have them in a pub or somewhere that people were able to talk freely about what's on their mind. And with that, I just want to, let's say we were to be doing that. Let's say we were able to have those conversations openly and honestly in that type of environment. What would you picture? What would you see around you if we were to be? What type of environment would we be in?
Well, I think I'd say it's your round, first and foremost. Just kind of
That seems fair.
you can kind of.
I think I'd probably owe you a pint.
Yeah. Just relax. You know, I mean, what some of the best conversations that my lads have been, you know, post playing football. So we might have played 5-side game, we might have played a tournament, and we just chatted things out, or you know, someone's brought something up about their doing or an anniversary of their child, and it's just a relaxed environment. The reason that I created the football team is to avoid the kind of sitting around in a circle kind of therapy situation, which I have no issues with at all. And I know there's lots of successful programs and processes out there, but it's just not for me. And it maybe potentially not for baby loss either, especially not for men. Men are very much kind of want to share, but don't want to share. You know, it's almost like you've got to crack that kind of core, or crack that kind of surface to get to the core of what they're thinking and what they want to say. And I found that with a lot of guys, they'll say, oh, I don't want to talk, I'm not really interested. And just by having that relaxed conversation and not being too over the top and not being too direct and talking about other things and slowly working your way around, things can come out. And that's kind of the environment that myself and you are in today, obviously virtually, but just two blokes relaxed having a chat.
When you say that blokes don't want to share, or I'm not a talker, why do you think that comes from?
It's a masculine thing, and it's ingrained in us from many years. And you know, simple phrases like "man up" and "oh, your big girl's blouse," the kind of things that set in that we as men should just have an off switch for emotions, whereas women are allowed to process them, and it's just such a ridiculous bullshit stereotype that just continues throughout life. And thankfully, you know, as generations go on, we're moving away, but I don't think we're necessarily moving away fast enough from it. And I know for myself that I want to sometimes talk about things, but I'm sat there and I'm going, please ask me, please ask me, please ask me. And that's from my wife, my friends, work colleagues. And all it takes is that simple, how are you doing? How's that made you feel? I can tell something's wrong. Is there anything you want to talk about? And one of the things I would say as well is ask twice. Are you all right? Yeah, I'm fine. No, mate, are you sure you're all right? And typically, I've found with myself, with my own experiences of opening up and other people, you ask somebody twice, you'll get them to open up. And it's just breaking down that bullshit thing of men are strong and men don't show weakness and we just have to man up and that's where it comes from, in my opinion.
And I totally recognise one of those experiences. The thing of asking twice. I can relate so many times when someone's asked me, "How you doing?" and you give that sort of like shrug. I'm all right. Yeah, be fine. And people, you can see sometimes that that's the answer that people want to hear as well. 'Cause you get that nod and then they scuttle away.
Yeah, yeah. I see it all the time with, "You all right? Yeah, yeah, great." Or "You all right? No, and they don't care. They're not asking, "Are you all right?" They're just greeting you. The real conversations come down to when you are genuinely interested in how someone's feeling. And I'm a big believer. I'm not really a religious person at all. In fact, I'm probably a pure atheist. But I'm a believer in karma. You know, I often think if you let someone out at a junction, you'll feel that you'll get paid back later down the road. And I think if you put out into the world what you want to get back, that will happen. So if you feel like you want people to have more engaging conversations or you want more mental health support, give that out to other people and don't just pay lip service. Don't be like, "You all right?" Listen to what they say, and whilst you're listening to what they're saying, thinking about what you're going to say, listen and take it in. And yeah, empathise by telling your own tale, but don't just have a conversation so that you can tell your story. It's important that you're listening. And you don't have to have the answers. This is big thing. There's a Brené Brown short on empathy called Silver Lining. And I found it so much with baby loss, you know, and it's because people don't know what to say. So they just say some bollocks that doesn't help at all. Or you know, you've lost a child. Oh, well, you're still young. Oh, well, you've got another. It's God's way. It's not God's way. Like, and all of this just doesn't make anything better when all you need to say when someone says, I'm feeling really shit, or this has happened and it's really bad, like a baby loss situation. And all I say typically to anybody that I'm speaking to, whether it be a new member or somebody going through something, will be, "That's really shit, mate. I'm sorry you're going through that." Don't try and fix it for them.
Just be with them.
Just be with them. Just be present. Just acknowledge that it's absolutely crap. Um, and you know, offer your advice maybe on how you've dealt with something similar. but don't try and silver line or don't try and make some bullshit reason that this is happening to him because there are no good reasons ever.
And there is something we sometimes stretch too far for that silver lining, don't we? When in some situations, like I say, there isn't a silver lining. It's just shit.
Yeah, and that's people wanting to fix it or not knowing what to say. And I genuinely think when we talk about this bullshit masculinity and how men should be strong and shouldn't show emotions, there's a lot of a lack of emotional intelligence from earlier generations, not knowing how to process the feelings correctly and not knowing how to deal with things. And it comes back from mothers and fathers from years and years ago, and it's all come down and all spread down. And it's because people just had these wrong stereotypes of how people behaved. And I've seen it in baby loss. I know a guy that lost, God knows how many years ago in the 90s, and the day after he was back at work. Um, my own dad, I think he was back at work pretty quick because he was self-employed and had to go off. And if he didn't, he lost that job and then potentially lost the next one. Nowadays, we're getting a lot more support. People, businesses, companies are recognizing that it's happening to the father as well, not just the mother.
And that brings me to want to ask. You mentioned it a few times. The football team that you've set up, SANDS United FC in West Yorkshire, and I want to ask where did that come from? What inspired you to take that action?
So I did, like I said, I did the 10K twice for each child and then did a rough run and I always did it for SANS. And for that reason, I think I was in a few groups on Facebook and stuff. And then I saw a Radio One video, I think it was a Christmas thing or something like that. I think it was Greg James and his wife sorry, not his wife, the person that set up SANS United Brighton, a bit of context, there's SANS United teams all over the country. And the person that set that up, his wife had nominated him for like a kind of award for all the work that he'd done, and they went round, and I saw it, and I thought, wow, that's right up my alley. I tried to reach out to a couple of teams locally. There's Doncaster, Stockport. I don't know where the next one closest would be, but ultimately there wasn't a team near me. So I decided to set my own team up. Originally, we were SANS United Huddersfield, and we were for a while. I didn't really know how to go about it. I didn't really have that many people that I could call on that played football, really. And what I didn't want is I didn't want a team of blokes that were all just my mates. I kind of wanted to try and involve as many lost dads as I could. So the idea was we play out of a little place in Huddersfield called it's called Score, and it's just an indoor five-a-side place. And I just got it on Facebook, really. Put it into some local groups that are normally whinging about fireworks going off and stuff like that. These community groups.
Other ones.
And I just dived into all that, got as much as I could, and it just spiraled. Just more men started getting involved, more dads, brothers of dads, best men of dads, just friends of dads. I've got a couple of lads that I used to work with. Well, they still work for the same company, but we've moved into different roles. But they come along and play. My nephew plays. Other family members have played in the past, and yeah, it's just kind of grown from there, really. The team is just typically there to support blokes who've lost a child or have been kind of touched by the loss of children. So it doesn't just have to be the dads; it can be anybody. And one dad who came along was actually one of our most kind of regular members. He's a father, but he's actually never lost a child, but his brother has. And he came into the team and people started talking and saying a lot more about their losses. And he said to me once that due to everything he'd heard, it helped him have better conversations with his brother around what had gone on. So it's really kicked on, it's really grown, and there's been quite a bit of press. We've got quite a bit of really good funding from different companies as well as local bodies. And I won an award the other day from BBC Radio Leeds, which was a good day out and quite an emotional day. Yeah.
And it sounds richly deserved as well, because that's an incredibly powerful thing that you've just described. That yes, it's there for you're having a direct effect on the men who are there, but you're having an indirect effect on men who might not be there but are touched by the people who play with you.
Yeah, and that's the important thing is because for me, there are teams out there that are just for dads. Mine is for every man, and I've had men that haven't lost and aren't even connected to it, but they could be going through something. And I'm not in a position to say no. I'm just here for one sort of, mental health concern. Ideally the team is there for that, but if somebody comes in and needs support, then I'm not gonna shut the door in their face. It's just not the kind of person that I am. From having doors shut in my face from my own family members, I am certainly not going to do that to somebody I don't know. I think one of the important things about my team is you can come along and just join. You don't need to tell me a tale. There's no interview at the start, entrance interview. I don't sit down and ask you all your questions. It's up to people to tell me what they want, and invariably people do, but sometimes people don't, and that's their choice.
How have you found those conversations in and around the games? They'd come up just naturally afterwards, or are they people approaching you? How do they tend to come up?
There's probably the kind of three ways that a conversation will come up. There's the individuals directly talking to me. There is the natural ones like you talk about after the game or when we're having a couple of drinks or something like that. And then there's the kind of group chat that we've got. In the group chat, we've got over 30 blokes. And sometimes people will talk about the anniversary of the loss. They'll talk about how they feel at Christmas, how they feel on their birthday, how they feel on the due date of what would have been the child. There's a lot of dates around. There's Baby Loss Awareness Week. There's Father's Day, which can be a particularly difficult time for dads that have lost. There's Mother's Day, which is obviously supporting the mum through that. So there's those kind of days and calendar days that people then talk about. They might bring something up about their own, or they might talk about a tattoo that they're going to get, or they might talk about an event that they're going to. And yeah, the conversations will happen quite generically from there. And I think what I've learned when I first started the team, I wanted the conversations to flow and I wanted people to be involved. So I felt like I was really involved. Now I tend to sit back and just let the lads chat, just so that they can grow themselves. And maybe that causes a little bit of a divide because I'm not always super involved. There's then the kind of direct conversations that they'll have with me, which some can be quite difficult, especially when dads or men that I've helped are particularly low. Bearing in mind that I've got absolutely fuck all mental health training. I don't profess to be any kind of specialist. I've got a job that I've had training within, mainly customer focused training, and I've obviously got my own experiences. But other than that, I'm just supporting these guys as a nobody, and that can take its toll on me, and take me away from my family life when my wife said to me, "Why are you messaging?" Well, we're in bed watching a film, or look at what the kids are doing, and I'm messaging somebody because and I have been there when somebody's telling me they're going to end their life, and I've had to call the police, and um, that's difficult because you could say it's not your job, or and people have said that in the past, but God, if something were to happen, that's such a heavy weight to hold for the rest of my life. Um, and then the conversations that happen face to face, which are really nice. I love to see the lads chatting in between themselves, and I'm kind of like a proud dad in those situations. I love to see it. I love to see them taking the piss out of each other. I love to see them winding each other up at the football tournaments and giving each other shit, and that. We've got a real camaraderie there. There is some really good relationships, and there's a bit of a lull at the minute. We've had to miss a couple of games because not miss a couple of games, a couple of five-a-sides because we haven't been able to get the numbers, and it's a real shame because we were doing quite well. Then we had a lull, kind of Christmas time, and we ran a tournament, so we got a lot of injuries. And then they went back, and we had like 2 or 3 weeks where they were playing. And I took it personally because I just had a vasectomy, so I couldn't play. And I thought, fuckers, as soon as I go off, you all start playing again. So I was like, I'm just going to turn up, and then they won't know. But yeah, we've had a bit of a lull, so I'm hoping we can get back to it, get some friendlies organised. It's difficult because I do it all, and me and my wife just do everything. The job lot, social media, running the club, finances, everything. So it can take its toll, and sometimes I have to prioritise things. And right now, my family's taking priority, and right so.
Yeah, and you have to look after yourself and what's important, don't you? But I just want to rewind a couple of minutes where you said that you're offering this as a no one. I really want to counter that massively because you're offering that as an incredible example and role model for people, as well as someone who has experienced those things as well, and you're offering it as a genuine bloke who wants to help. That's incredibly moving to hear.
Based on my own mental health and what we come back to around men's mental health, it's really uncomfortable for you to give me praise. So I'll take it. I appreciate it. But yeah, I always, and like with the award, I got really uncomfortable, really, really uncomfortable. I actually cried walking up to the stage with all the emotion and everything that I was feeling. Because it was a long, long award ceremony. It wasn't that long, but I was the last one to be awarded that day. There were 4 candidates. I thought the candidates in it were better than me. And then I found out who was judging the award because each category had a judge. So Josh Warrington was one of the judges, someone else from Yorkshire, and then it was the Brownlee brothers that judged my category. So as soon as that came on, or as soon as I found that out, my wife was there. My mother-in-law and my brother-in-law and his wife were there with me. I took them along for the day. They were all like, "Oh, it's going to be you now. It's going to be you," because no one else was sport in that category. And they came on the Brandley brothers and they'd done the recording and they said everybody was worthwhile, and then they said but this category due to its support of mental health and the use of sport. And my wife just grabbed my hand, like it's you. And then they said the name, and then that was it. Yeah, super uncomfy from there. And went on the radio the next day, radio leads, and got a lot of praise, like you just said then and again. Super uncomfy. I do appreciate it, but yeah.
Well, in that case, I'm delighted to have made you slightly uncomfortable right now.
Oh, thank you.
Well deserved. Definitely well deserved.
Yeah.
You mentioned your own experiences as well of losing children and how difficult that is. I wanted to ask about how you felt that impacted on you in terms of where you were at the time.
Because we'd lost my brother due to a neonatal head condition, and both my first 2 children were neonatal head conditions, fatal head conditions. I blamed myself a lot. I was convinced it was my genetics. I had some really dark times. I made some plans to end my life. And really the only thing that kept me going at that point was my wife and my stepson Isaac. Just what I'd do to them. And I think that's one of the main things that men need to remember, or everybody needs to remember, is however much you're hurting, you're worth it and you're there, and those people will hurt forever more if you're not. I had an insurance policy on my head, life insurance, and I wasn't doing particularly well at work, and I felt like that was financially impacting us as well. And due to the financial impact and the way I was feeling, I felt like my wife and my son, I'd be better off with the money than me. And I think a lot of, I go back to the initial loss. I repressed it a lot. I didn't really talk about it. They told us it was a condition called anencephaly. The first thing I did, they were reduced to the hospital. We had a scan, but because there were no doctors there, because the Conservatives had cut the fucking NHS to the bone, we then had to go to Leeds later that day for a scan with the doctor present. So they told us what had happened. A condition called anencephaly, suspected. Couldn't tell us for sure, again, because there were no doctors there. Got sent home. Of course, Googled it. Not a good story, not a good place or condition to have. Went to the scan later that day, and basically told us that the baby wouldn't survive, and that was pretty much the end. Um, I just didn't process it. Didn't really, just kept looking after the wife, kept making sure Olivia was okay. And there was a point at which Olivia's mum came up, Julie, and she said, she just came up, and the guys that she just wanted to have a chat and see us, but really, I think she knew that Olivia needed a mum. Um, and I just said, right, I'll go get some shopping because we were just caught off guard. We expected to have this 12-week scan and then we're going back to work, and um, we didn't have anything in the house and stuff like that. So I went out, went to Morrison's, and then on the way home, just nipped into a pub, local pub. And I got a bottle of beer and sat around the corner in kind of a pub, kind of had different levels, and I sat like in a lower corner, kind of outside of anybody, in the middle of the day, so it wasn't super busy. Weirdly enough, I do a Tuesday quiz there with Olivia's dad, and that's where we sit every week. So I always remember it. But I sat in that corner, and I had Linkin Park on, throwback to my younger years, and I just started crying, and I just cried and cried and cried, and at the time I felt like I was being sorry for myself, but I felt a lot better for it. I felt like I'd processed it, and I found I came out the other side and felt like I wanted to keep doing that and keep pushing. I felt like I'd removed a bit of a blocker in my own emotions.
A bit of a release valve at that point.
Yeah, and this sounds such a crappy analogy, but if you've got a sink that's blocked and it's blocked with crap and it's got stuff stuck to the side and all that kind of stuff, and you put a drain blocker down, it works its way through and takes away slowly those blocks, and they're not gone completely, and it'll still be a mess and it'll still be awful down there, but it's working its way through. And I think that's how I felt, that things were opening up and things were being processed. Obviously that was the initial loss, and things happened again and again, so I wasn't quite out of it.
Did you have an opportunity to speak about your experience or to find some support from somewhere?
I am now. I didn't at the time. A lot of it was just kind of white knuckling it. But I've actually, due to my employer, I've managed to get some private healthcare. Because again, I won't be able to get it on NHS because it's so super underfunded. And I would, but I'd wait forever. But yeah, I've got private healthcare with a therapist in Bradford, and I see her once a week. We're currently doing some EMDR therapy, which is really interesting, and it's really broken down and opened up some kind of removed some blocks and opened up some things that I didn't quite know and I've not processed. So I'm probably about 5 or 6 weeks into that, and that's it's what I'm hoping, because a lot of when we lost my brother Josh and kind of our losses as well, I don't really remember, and I think I've repressed a lot of it. So I'm hoping that I can kind of boot some of that stuff through and sort that out so that I can potentially deal with it. I think it's the way that the AMDR talks about it is it goes through a kind of conveyor belt, and your emotions go through, and typically they go along the conveyor belt and they get sorted into the end, where they get sorted into files and drawers and stuff, and quite often trauma and things that happen, bad situations in your life, get on the conveyor belt and just stay there and stop other things going along. And I've got that analogy in my mind that hopefully this process and this therapy that I'm working on, will help move some of those stuff along, because I know that there's other things that have happened in my life. My cousin Jake Hartley was one of the Warrior Six that was blown up in Afghanistan. He was in the Yorkshire Regiment, and I don't remember a lot of that. I don't think I processed a lot of that. So I'm hoping that the support that I've got will work a lot of that through.
And being able to take the steps to turn towards that and to be able to access that support, because I think an important thing that you're sort of saying there, and please tell me if I'm wrong, is it's never too late to seek that support. Just because it didn't happen the day after, the week after, the month after, or even the year after, doesn't mean to say you can't go back and try to
Yeah, 100%. I think you could be talking 20 years. My therapist talked to me about somebody who had a car crash and the VMDR'd it through, and it was 10 years ago. And it was affecting her because it was a trauma. So it's never too late to open up a conversation and talk about something, and you don't know how well you might feel after that. And something else that I'd also say about getting support is don't just look at getting support in the emergency situations when you're really down, when you're maybe suicidal, when you're really feeling it. I wasn't particularly in a super bad place right now, but I took myself into therapy because I feel like I know that I've got things to process and I won't be concentrating on how low I am. It's more about, processing those things through. The analogy that I'd say is if you're an asthma sufferer, you've got a brown inhaler and a blue inhaler, and the blue inhaler is for emergency. The brown inhaler you take every day just so that you can function. Therapy should be like the brown inhaler, not the blue inhaler. Don't get me wrong, there is emergency therapy and you definitely need it at certain points, trauma counselling and things like that. But get yourself in if you feel that there's something there that is stopping you living your life how you want to, or is going to affect you when you're at your really dark point.
How do you think we can encourage more men to talk about what you're talking about? Things around the loss of children or being able to process grief or trauma?
Well, I think I'm very much a results and tangible kind of guy. I tell my therapist, I'm completely honest with her, I'm not 100% sold on the EMDR, or I wasn't, but I've seen some results, and I think if you can highlight to blokes or to men or any kind of any gender really, what the result of therapy is or talk is, and show them how people feel after. And I think ultimately this question or the fact that we're doing this answers the question. We're talking about the help that people can get and how it makes people feel and how it makes people come out the other side. So if anything, your podcast talking about how um, speech therapy or talking about how just being open can help is exactly what we need out there. And the other main thing would be taking away the shame and taking away that again that bullshit, the belief that men shouldn't talk and men should just stick their emotions away and just be strong, go down pub and all that kind of bollocks. And all that ends up happening is these emotions that they're stuck away, just they have a few beers and then they end up fighting or they end up processing them in different ways and or self-medicating. And I have been completely a self-medicator, whether it be alcohol, gambling, um, junk food, uh, even computer games. You get those little what's the word? Endorphins from computer games, and it's those things that we're doing are just there to kind of mask what we really need, which is good mental health support.
Thank you. And before we came on today, I know we talked a little bit about some stats around baby loss and around infant loss. And you mentioned that around 13 babies a day are
Mm,
dying. And yet,
yeah,
when we talk about that, well, we don't talk about that, do we? It's not really something that's
no,
known.
and it's such a difficult one because if you say to somebody, I'll frame this a different way. If you say to somebody, I've just passed my test or I've got my driving test on Friday, they'll say to you, oh, I passed first time. Or they'll say, took me 7 times. Or they'll say, oh, my brother was crap, it took him 10 times to pass his test. If you say I'm pregnant, you don't say, oh, I lost my child. The only time we talk about baby loss is when somebody else is bringing that baby loss conversation to you. And so many times, so many people that I've had the conversations with, or I've been open about and talked about it with, have said, "Oh, I lost, my daughter lost, my auntie lost, my grandma lost, well, it's a shame that I've just listed females, because again, we don't necessarily talk about the bloke in that situation, but having those conversations open people up, and I did an internal story I work for Lloyd's Banking Group, and we've got an internal intranet and kind of an internal kind of Facebook group that's kind of more towards business. But there is an element of mental health and well-being within there. And I added a story, or I was asked to do a story during Baby Loss Awareness Week, and the story went live, and it spoke about what I'd gone through with me and Olivia. And it was the most commented on and most liked story they'd ever had on the network. And all of the comments typically were support, but there was battered in there, there was comments of my loss, I went through this, I went through this, I went through this. And men and women commenting on it and telling their story. And I think it's just by having that conversation and just talking about it encourages others to have conversations with all kind of situations and just be receptive to when somebody says that's not taboo. We shouldn't shut up. We should not talk about it. It's our life experience, and if we want to talk about it, then we can. No one should stop us doing that ever. Um, and if somebody wants to talk to you about it, just be receptive to it. And if you're uncomfortable, tell them why you're uncomfortable. Tell them, why it's difficult to have that conversation. You might tell them something they've never known before. But just don't stop talking about things because they might be taboo because they're just not.
And before, obviously, knowing that we were going to be talking about this, I was thinking about my group of friends, and there's one WhatsApp group in particular where there's about 6, 7 of us known each other since we were about 13. All bunch of lads, all grown up, playing football, mucking around, that type of thing. And I think pretty much everyone in that group has a story around child loss or miscarriage or that type of difficulty. And I can probably
Mm.
name about 8 or 9 people. Obviously, I won't, but I can name 8 or 9 people who I know very closely who've all experienced it. And I don't know that many people in the world. And
No.
that's only the people that I've spoken to about it or who've spoken to me about it. But yet I'm lucky that I've got incredibly supportive and open friends. It's just not something that we hear about, especially men talking about it.
I've always been that guy, that juxtaposition guy. So my wife doesn't kind of speak. We're the other way around of that gender kind of situation. I'm the one that talks and she's the one that doesn't. But when this all happened and I saw firsthand in the hospital and after and during the lack of support for men, I felt like I needed to do something for myself, but for my kids as well. This is their legacy, is this. One day, I've got 3 boys. I've got Isaac, who's 9, I've got Toby, who's 2, and I've got Teddy, who's 7 months. One day, all 3 of my boys will pull on the shirt for this team.
But that does also make me want to ask about you mentioned the legacy and you mentioned your boys pulling on that top. What will it mean when they do?
It'll just blow me away. It'll be like they're playing with the brothers and sisters that are here. We've already got a kit for Isaac, who's the 9-year-old, and he's got his little kit, and do kiddies kits, and he's got the same number as me. And on the shirts, um, under the badge, you can have the name of the children, or you can have stars. So I have 4 stars, from 3 for my children and 1 for my brother. But just seeing him that kit now, seeing him at 9 years old, it's just amazing. I've got photos from the tournament. We've played a tournament 3 times. It's the SANDS United Yorkshire and Lincolnshire tournament. We play it every year. Um, and I've got photos of me and him when we won it with the trophy, and me and him when I'm coaching him and I'm pointing at somebody on the field and he's in the background, kind of just in awe. It's just kind of a pride and warmth that you just don't experience anywhere else, I don't think. And it's such a tragic circumstance that we've got, but it brings so much happiness. And I want this to keep running as long as possible. And I want my children to take over. And when I'm gone, somebody else to take over after them, if need be. And, there's no reason for this not to be a legacy for the ages because the support is needed. And it'll all be started from my children that aren't here.
Thank you, Alex. That sounds as a legacy and as an impact on so many. It's an incredible thing that you're doing and will continue. But as well, I want to ask a final question from me really is around a lot of the people I've spoken to, and thinking in my own experience as well, about supporting your wife, your partner, your girlfriend, and that I have to be strong for them, almost translating to I can't get support for myself at the same time. And I'm just wondering about your experience of that, or if that's something that you've noticed or heard.
Yeah, in my experience, when we had our losses, I was very much, doing. I say I've repressed it, but I've kind of got flashing memories of. I think we sat down, or we didn't. I didn't sit down. We put Broadchurch on the series, and we watched it all the way through. Olivia was sat on the couch, kind of, I say self-hugging and kind of looking after herself, and I was very much doing. I was got the ironing board out, did all the ironing. I'd be running around the house and trying to get stuff done, and that I think that was again, like you said, just the diet being strong situation. And yeah, I did close myself off to it, to processing my emotions, and I think yeah, you can go through it together, and if that's the way your relationship is, that you're going to process it together, then great. But there's nothing wrong in processing it apart, and finding your own support and finding a friend that you can lean on or a family member. And then when you want to be strong for your wife or your partner or whatever, then be strong. Olivia said at one time to me, all she wanted was a hug, and that's what we did. We just cuddled on the couch and watched TV. Um, some people want to talk it out, some people don't. Fortunately, a lot of the time, there's nothing you can do. There are some tough decisions that you have to make, and I found it really hard, as I imagine everyone will when I say this. But we didn't want to leave our children in a graveyard. We didn't want to leave our children alone. We didn't want them to go the other way, which was the hospital told us there's a group cremation for children that are lost, and that just felt so impersonal. So we buried our children, and I dug a grave and buried our children twice. And I had to be really strong when I did that, and I broke down when I did that, when I was just sat there going, I should be picking fucking names out. I shouldn't be digging a hole in the ground. Um, and you have to be strong in those moments, but you can then be weak, or you can then not be weak, but you can be open after the fact and accept that that was a hard thing to do, and stop white knuckling it and process it through. Um, because there are going to be moments when strength is needed, and that's not a bad thing. And I wish there were an opposite to weakness, an opposite to strength that wasn't weakness, because it sounds wrong, but you can be strong, but you can be open at the other time, and be there for your partners as much as they need. Some relationships have been pushed apart by this. I know that I've seen it in my own team, and some people have broken up over it. For me and Olivia, it made us stronger. I don't know if that's where we were before or if that's who we are, but we grew closer, and we did it together, and we've processed it whatever way felt appropriate for us. And we didn't get it right from the start, weirdly enough, because we've had 3 times. We've learned how to process it maybe as we've had it, or we've gone through it. But the don't forget the dads is an important thing. And one experience that I had that showed that somebody particular in the NHS felt that it was a mum situation. We was with our miscarried child. We were in the early pregnancy unit because of what had happened with the previous two, and Olivia had a scan, and then she went to the toilet, which was to the side of us, still attached to the room, to kind of just redress and sort herself out. And I was sat there, and I just turned to the sonographer and just said, is everything all right? And without looking at me, without a beat, without looking away from the monitor, she just said, no, she's miscarried. Um, and Olivia came out of the toilet and didn't know, and I did. And that was just such an awful experience, an awful feeling, that I then had to tell her what had happened. Um, Clearly because that individual, female individual actually, didn't realise that it was a something that was going to affect us both, not just the partner or the woman.
Sounds an incredibly difficult experience. Now, I think the thing that you're saying there, strength, it comes in different forms, doesn't it? Whether we need an opposite to strength, or whether we just say that strength takes different guises in different situations, depending on what's needed.
Yeah, 100%. I think I thank you for that because you've hit the nail on the head, and that'll probably change how I have conversations in future. Because I think as soon as you said that, I've realised that it takes strength to open up. It takes strength to speak to a man, another man, or to speak for a man to open up. And women, any human being can be strong, lifting things, going through something. But again, it takes strength to be vulnerable, I guess. And I think that's it. That's the thing that I needed to say. To be vulnerable and to open up and to be um, that way with yourself and with anybody else is strong. And you are a strong person if you do that.
Thank you, Alex. Now, before we move on, I just want to say a massive thank you, Alex. And it's an absolute honour to be able to speak to you, and it's remarkable to hear you speak in the way that you are doing. What we're going to do now is we're going to wrap up this section, and we're going to move on with a little musical interlude, and I'll see you in a few seconds. So, welcome back, everyone. And again, it's probably only been a few seconds for you, but I again want to just start by saying a massive thank you to Alex. But what we want to do now is the thing that we do, or we try to do every week, because we know that people are inspired by different parts of the world and their ideas of what it means to be a man, what masculinity, what, as we said earlier, strength, all these type of things, what they mean to each person. So I'm going to ask each person about someone or some people from either TV, from film, from books, from whatever that inspired their ideas of what being a man is all about. And therefore, I'm going to ask Alex, who have you chosen? Who would be the person that inspired your idea of masculinity?
So obviously we spoke about this before, and I picked two people that were both from TV and film. And originally I picked JD from Scrubs, played by Zach Braff, and then I picked John McClane, obviously from Die Hard, played by Bruce Willis. And then thinking about it, I thought there was a better conversation we could have, so I went for Perry Cox or Dr. Cox from Scrubs, played by John C. McGinley. So I asked if I could have two based on kind of the constant struggle that I have with my own masculinity. And I think these two summed it up really. For those that haven't seen Scrubs, JD is kind of the main character. It tracks his life through becoming a doctor straight out of med school and then all the way through to him kind of being kind of one of the most responsible or senior doctors. Dr. Cox is already there when he gets there, and he's kind of this mean, kind of angry, closed off guy. And for me, JD is very, the word kind of, he's not strong in his masculinity. And when I talk about that, I mean, he doesn't care that he loves musicals. He doesn't care that he might have particular facial treatments and he's quite close with Turk, who's his best friend, and he's quite openly emotional about that. And they love hugging, and Turk in particular like that. But for me, I mean, they even sing a song about guy love, which if you've never seen Scrubs, just Google Scrubs guy love, and it's just hilarious. The song, the way they talk about how they've got love for each other, but it's not the love that shouldn't be spoken about, or something like that. It's very a little bit out of date now, obviously, because but it talks about stereotypes quite openly. And you used the word that I really thought was appropriate. It was a dichotomy between JD and Dr. Cox, and it's because one's really masculine and one isn't. And I never know where I am on that line, and sometimes I struggle with it. And I do love musicals. I do love some musicals. I love a bit of Les Mis. I love The Greatest Showman. I love, kind of that kind of music. I used to listen to Five and Backstreet Boys, but even when I did that as a child, I felt like people would call me gay, or people would call me a puff, or people would, all the inappropriate sayings that came out. I'm 35, I think. Wife's not here, so I can't ask her. I'm always into passing with me. I think
Yeah.
I'm just, I'm, I just want to be 30 forever. It's not happening. But back back in those days, sound like such an old man, but back in those days, it was, people would call you gay for the slightest bit of femininity, and I've always kind of wanted to push a little bit with that, and I'm a straight heterosexual man, but I do like being a little bit flamboyant sometimes, and I do like pushing that. But it's tough, and those two characters, Dr. Cox constantly gets at JD for being feminine, and at one point in one episode, he gives him man cards, and these man cards are to be taken away if he does anything that's not manly. And the first card he gives him, and he gives him the cards, and he goes, "Oh, the calligraphy is darling," and he goes, "Well, there you go, you've lost one already." Um, and these,
Doesn't Dr. Cox pretty much always call JD by a woman's name
yeah,
most of the time?
exactly. Every single interaction, he's got names for him, Veronica, Barbara, whatever, and they're always different feminine names. But yeah, and that's the kind of what tracks throughout the show is constant interaction that they have. So that's why I kind of spoke about them, because I've really struggled kind of with my masculinity throughout my life, and where I should be and what I should do. And I think I worked at a joinery warehouse. I went to America and I came back, and I got a job there, and it was such a toxic masculine workplace. I walked in the morning, and they'd use really derogatory terms to greet you. Really, the derogatory term for being a gay man, and they would say that was kind of a off the cuff joke, and constantly you were spoken about if you did anything wrong. I did anything slightly feminine as gay, and it was really difficult because obviously I knew I wasn't, I definitely wasn't, but my best friend of years, and I worked with him when Wolves were still around when I was 16. I know he's gay, and I've known him for a long time, and I really struggled with it. But then I fell into it as well, and I knew that I was doing something that was wrong, but I was just trying to be one of the crowd. And I think sometimes with masculinity, you can have that kind of peer pressure and way that you might end up being just falling into being like the crowd just to fit in and belong, and not be targeted, I suppose. When as apprentices came in and I got more senior, I was less of a target. But then I left that job, which was a joinery warehouse, and went to a financial institution, one of the biggest in the country, that is so accepting and so open and encourages kind of everybody's differences. And I think it slowly allowed me a little bit to open up a bit more around my masculinity and who I want to be.
And there's a word that you've come into that a few times. That idea of should. This is how I should be as a man. This is how I should fit in. This is how I should do this. And who's the one that's defining what should would be? You also gave me a flash in my own head of there's a bar in Sheffield. It's called Pop World, and it is the cheesiest.
Yeah, yeah.
And people who
I've got them all
people
over.
who know what they are know what they are. And the amount of times I've walked in there, and suddenly I found myself singing all the words to a Bewitched song. I'm like, oh, this is brilliant! I love this. Why do I know this? Or singing to a Disney a Disney song from when I were a kid, but like really going for it. Like, I love this. Why not?
Weirdly enough, we ended up at Pop World in Newcastle on my stag do, and we all loved it. But yeah, I've been up on the karaoke singing probably non-masculine songs. Again, I found a band today, weirdly enough, on iTunes that cover like a rock band, but they cover like Disney songs. And they were doing Moana, and I was like, "Oh, this is
Is
right,
that
my
Punk
jam."
Rock Factory by any chance?
It's not, no.
Oh,
It's
I'm gonna say
I can't remember.
they do a Moana version, and I found myself
Yeah,
singing that with my little boy because,
yeah,
again, why not? I do like the idea of the dichotomy between JD Dr Cox, and how it just slides around depending on what situation you're in. And I can definitely relate. But thank you for that. It's really interesting to hear. And what we wanted to do now was to wrap things up today. Alex, before we started, he shared a poem that he wanted to be read out, and I want to share it with you all because having read this was incredibly touching, incredibly moving, and I think it's an apt place for us to end.
Just on the poem,
Please do.
the masculinity wise, the fact that I brought a poem feels very feminine to me, and I feel like if I were back in the day, oh, a poem, oh, you big girl's blouse, oh, how flouncy are you? But this poem epitomised how I felt during our losses, and I know as how other men have felt. And I wanted to read it today, didn't I, Steve? And we had a conversation kind of offline. But it's just going to be, it would be so difficult for me to read, and I'd probably break down, um, like that big girl's blouse that everyone talk about. So it's best that Steve reads it, but it is so important. And if you listen to the words and you especially listen to the last line, you will understand just how baby loss affects men. And throughout this, the main message for me, women should 100% get the support they need, but just let's just not forget about the men.
Thank you very much, Alex. Wonderfully said. It must be very difficult to be a man in grief, since men don't cry and men unstrong, no tears can bring relief. It must be very difficult to stand up to the test, and field calls and visitors so that she can get some rest. They always ask if she's all right and what she's going through, but seldom take his hand and ask, "My friend, how are you?" He hears her cry in the night and thinks his heart will break, and dries her tears and comforts her, but stays strong for her sake. It must be very difficult to start each day anew, and try to be so very brave, as he lost his baby too. So just to finish, a massive, massive, massive thank you to Alex. And I know we talked about giving praise and welcome, but just to say, Alex, you're an absolute inspiration. And I genuinely and heartfelt mean that. And I'm sure that everyone listening will echo that as well. I will put some links in the description for links to sort of the SANDS charity or any other useful information if you've thought about anything we've talked about or you want to get some more information. But for now, please take care. I hope you hear me again soon. And in the meantime, I'll see you later. Bye.